Harrison Faulkner here reporting for True North in Etobicoke, Ontario, the heart of Ford Nation. Behind me in the Toronto Congress Centre, Doug Ford will address his supporters one last time before Ontario voters head to the polls tomorrow. The polls at the moment are looking very favourable for Doug Ford. Everything is pointing to Doug Ford extending his majority government and remaining Premier for another 4 years. So we're here and we want to ask Doug Ford supporters about one accomplishment he has had in office that they feel best represents his 4 years as Premier of Ontario. And given that it's a near certainty the Premier will remain Premier for the next 4 years, we wanted to ask them about one thing they feel the Premier can improve on in the next 4 years in leading the province. We're going to head inside, we're going to try and head inside and see what happens and see if we can talk to some Ontario PC supporters.
If you want more reports, more committees, and more empty talk, well, you've got a lot of options in this election. But if you want real action, if you want to get it done, you have one choice, the Ontario PC.
What's the biggest accomplishment that the Ford government was able to do in the first 4 years that you think for you symbolizes their first 4 years?
You know, I think it's tough to judge the first 4 years because half of it was hampered by COVID. Like the last 2 years was almost a write-off, and before that, there were some challenges with the government. So I don't think you can really look at those 4 years accurately because we had a once-in-a-lifetime event. So I think it's more fair to look at the platform and see how that'll play out in the next few years and how we'll recover from the pandemic as opposed to looking at the last 4 years, because it's just not a great baseline to judge any politician, and not just Doug Ford, any politician across the board.
What's the biggest accomplishment you think he had in the first 4 years that you think symbolizes his time as Premier?
For me, because I have been living here for 10 years, the greatest thing that he done for those people in this province is, he's increased the public transportation, so I can get everywhere. I can walk, everywhere that I want by public transit. It's so convenient for me. I don't need, to take more time. And it's what he's focusing. And he increasing the wage. And he increasing the wage for those working in healthcare system, especially for nurse, customer support worker. And he has a plan to, to get more people to work in healthcare system. So that's what all Ontario people need.
The main thing which Doug Ford did in the past 4 years was the investment in the infrastructure, was the investments in the youth program, was there taking care of the youth. The pandemic was such a bad situation all over the world. In those times, Doug Ford proven his skill and successful leadership. So we see a leader qualities in Doug Ford.
And I'll add one thing here, that he did a lot for small businesses because they are the backbone of any community. So they did a lot of improvement and we are very happy with that.
What do you think are some of the things that the Premier could improve on in the next 4 years?
I think we saw the True Blue Party pop up. That had a lot to do with the fact that the PCs were more centrist during all of COVID. I think focusing more on housing policy, more on the economics of all of the issues that people are facing, inflation, rising housing prices, rising grocery prices. Focusing on that stuff, focusing on the economics of it, I think is something, and that's highlighted in a lot of the plans.
For me, that he gonna work, to build this province become, a very good province for, those immigrants, especially for those seniors, because they need a lot of work done, especially me. I'm working for, retirement home. As a cook for retirement home, I know that the level of care for those seniors we need for. You need him, to work on his, plan for the rest of the people in the province, and especially those seniors that I love.
So we feel that Doug Ford is addressing the issues of Ontarians so well. The number one is the health. Number two is the Highway 413, which is much needed for the traffic of Ontario. So in pandemic, we all have seen how Doug Ford has performed so well, taken so well care of Ontarians. Same way, the Ontario needs a lot more to be done. So these next 5 years must for Doug Ford.
Given that it's looking very likely that the Doug Ford PCs are going to retain their majority government and remain in government for the next 4 years, I wanted to ask some cabinet ministers what they think they can improve on in the next 4 years if they're elected tomorrow. Interestingly, Paul Calandra, the government House leader, said that he thinks the PCs can improve in their communication and that Conservatives struggle to communicate to the base during the pandemic. I was able to catch up with Transportation Minister Caroline Mulroney, Treasury Board President Pramit Sarkaria, and of course Paul Calandra. Here's what they had to say. So what would you do in the next 4 years if you win tomorrow that you weren't able to do in the first four and that you feel you could have done better?
Well, I'll say that we've always been steadfast in our mission to make government smaller, to invest in infrastructure the Liberals did not do. We inherited a system of hallway healthcare. I think the Premier and our government did a great job of managing the pandemic as best we could, but we need to continue to invest in healthcare and recruit people in our healthcare sector. So I think that's going to be a priority going forward.
Well, I think, given the last 2 years, it's been a very difficult time for many people. We want to move forward. We want to move forward by building on our strong economy. We want to make sure our economy stays open. We want to make sure that we've got good paying jobs for the future generations. And we want to make sure we're investing in infrastructure. So for the next 10 years, we can attract new jobs. We're going to continue to make Ontario more competitive. Reduce regulation, red tape reduction, and make sure, once again, Ontario becomes the economic engine of this country, which it always has been and always will be.
What's one thing in the first 4 years you felt like you could improve on in the next 4 years?
Yeah, look, I think it's with everybody. It's communication, right? I think it's something that Conservatives always talk about, improving how we communicate with people so they know what it is that we're doing and what we want to accomplish. And as hard as we try, I think whether it's federally, provincially, or even municipally, Conservatives always seem to have trouble at communicating. And I think that's the part that we got to do a bit better over the next 4 years.
In Etobicoke for True North, Harrison Faulkner.